Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this webinar of Canadian Business Immigration Program. Sorry, we have a little bit of technical glitch. Today, the topic is different kinds of Canadian business immigration. And let me introduce a little bit about myself and also the speaker. My name is Attorney Sajjad. I'm immigration consultant and under Southeast Asia Business Center, Singapore. The end-to-end immigration services is one of the businesses under SBC. And today our speaker is Mr. Sajjad Malik. Let me read a little bit of his background. He is barrister and solicitor licensed by the Law Society of Ontario, Canada, member of Canadian Bar Association, and executive of the Ontario Bar Association Citizenship and Immigration Section. He is also practices business immigration law in Canada and globally. And wow, so many. Past members, CBA's Policy Committee and CBA's Equality and Diversity Subcommittee, ex-Deputy Commissioner of Income Tax at SDR, and ex-Telenor ASA's Corporate Affairs Head. And now I'm live in a resort in Tanjung Lesung, 4 hours from Jakarta, and he's live from Markham, Ontario, Canada. So there are 11 hours difference between us. Okay, before we started, let me read a little bit of the rules of this webinar. Kindly mute your audio during the session, and later on during the question and answer, you can directly ask verbally, or if not, then you can post in the chat box and then I will read it for you. Okay, without further ado, Sajjad, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Georgina. Thank you very much, all participants, for sparing time and joining this webinar. We tried to keep this webinar more interactive. That's why we have chosen the meeting format for this webinar. So at the end of presentation, if we have questions and if you wish to discuss a few aspects of it, we could comfortably discuss. Thank you very much for the introduction, Georgina. I'm grateful to you, Rudy, to organize this event for this. This will be an opportunity to share certain programs and much of information, which generally I believe when clients across the world, they get in touch with our law firm, we realize that there are so many misconceptions and there is so much which people need to know before they take the important decision of immigrating to Canada, especially in the business context. Since most of the people that we are targeting at this time, or our audience is mostly entrepreneurs, business persons, or corporate managers who have somehow got involved or managed a business. Therefore, this is kind of a sophisticated audience, and we assume that most of the people joining this webinar, they already have understanding of the basic concepts of business, including marketing, business development, and human resources. If at any time, if you feel that there is something which need to discuss, or there's something which you would need to clarify, then please note it down. And at the end of presentation, we will have enough time to interact. Afterwards as well, you can always send your follow-up questions to Georgina or to Rudy or to myself, and we'll make sure that nothing remains unanswered. Now, my introduction, Georgina has very well elaborated my background, but I would like to say that I am not only an immigration lawyer, but a corporate and business lawyer. When we are looking at immigration through business, then we have to do certain aspects of development of a business and assisting clients with the legal services which fall in the domain of business law. But that gives us the comfort, and that gives me the comfort when I'm handling cases for offshore and foreign investors who are thinking of investing into Canada and making their lives here. A few things I wish to clarify. When I talk of an applicant, that applicant means the principal applicant, whoever becomes the principal applicant and who proposes to the Canadian authorities that that person would start a business in Canada or acquire a business in Canada. But by applicant, I would also mean throughout the discussion, the applicant's dependent family member, including applicant's spouse and applicant's dependent children. And the definition of dependent children in Canadian immigration law is the unmarried children who are below 22 years of age or who are 21 years of age, which means that before they turn 21, if your application has been submitted to the Canadian authorities, then that age of that child is locked in, and that child is still considered dependent throughout the application process. Now, without further ado, we would jump into the content of this presentation, and I hope you would be able to share my presentation. If someone could just confirm, Georgina, can you see my presentation?
Yes, I can.
All right. So we start this webinar with the introduction of, there are more than 100 different pathways available for different kind of people to immigrate to Canada, which include skilled professionals and which may include asylum seekers and people who already have families here. But the mandate of this webinar is to only focus on a few programs of business immigration. Now, there are programs other than this program, other than the categories which we'll be discussing in this program, which includes if you already have an existing business somewhere in the world and you have enough documentation to prove your business engagement and the profitability, then you could always diversify and extend your business to Canada through a subsidy, sister concern, and through a process called intra-company transfer. So in that way, you can transfer your employees, or you can transfer the owners or the directors of a company to their Canadian subsidy income through that. Similarly, if you have business impact, if you can create significant business impact on the Canadian economy and produce jobs, then that is again a category which can be done. So I want to disclaim that the categories which we are discussing today, I've only picked up 3 of them, but there are other categories as well. So if somehow you feel that you do not fall in any of the categories which we are going to discuss, please don't get disappointed, because there are further classes available as well. But I didn't want to overwhelm you with the types of classes, and we didn't have enough time for this meeting. Therefore, I've confined myself to this, but yes, we can always do a specific assessment of your situation and look at the categories which might fit you in. I always tell my clients, if you are motivated, if you really want to immigrate to Canada, we can definitely find a program which is a better fit for you. But it all depends on the motivation level, the amount of investment you want to make, the kind of, it needs commitment. It cannot be done casually now, because since Trump's government in the USA, a lot of demand has risen for the Canadian immigration, and it has become really competitive. I say you really have to compete and win your position as an immigrant when you decide of taking this path. And this path is long, but we can make it as smooth as possible for you through our offices. Now, introduction, I would skip because you already have seen this. Now, the categories which we are focusing today are 3. One is provincial nominee programs for entrepreneurs stream. Canada is a federal government. The federal government of Canada runs the immigration programs. Now, different provinces, there are 10 provinces and 3 territories in Canada. And most of the provinces and territories, they also have needs, the business needs. They need entrepreneurs in their communities. They need people who could come and run their businesses. They need investments in particular sector. Now, the federal government entered into various agreements with these provinces, though the quota and the allocation of seats is driven by the government. The government allows provinces certain number of immigrants every year. So they tell the provinces that you go ahead, run a parallel selection process, and the people or business persons or skilled persons that province would select through its own independent process, they are considered or to be made permanent residents of Canada. The provincial nominee programs are those programs in which individuals, they apply to provinces, provinces set criteria, in our case for entrepreneurs and for businesses which can apply under these provincial nominee programs. And once they successfully undergo the process and they succeed in the provincial to get a slot or nomination by the province, then the federal government considers issuing them permanent residence in Canada, which ultimately leads to citizenship. The second category we are discussing today would be self-employed person programs. Self-employed people are the people who are not working with a company on a salary, but these are the people who are engaged in some kind of self-employment, including cultural activities, artists, people in show business, directors of movies, stars, and people involved in sports at a reasonably accomplished level. So these are the people who could also apply. And third are the people, owners and operators of a business. Such individuals who decide to buy a business in Canada and they want to come to Canada to operate that business, those businesses could come through an arrangement called owner and operator of a business, in which they purchase the business, then they go to the government of Canada to establish their credentials and to confirm that they have the ownership of that particular business, and their skill set is required in Canada to run the business, and there's no other Canadian who can take their place. Now, this program is undergoing a few changes, and they are in consideration, but at this moment, if you wish to buy a business, you can own and operate that business, and for that, you can apply to the government, get a work permit, and come to Canada. Now, the first program we are talking about in a little more detail is the Provincial Nominee Program for Entrepreneurs. Now, as I told you, there are 10 different provinces, and there are 3 different territories in Canada. Most of the provinces and territories have one or the other variation of this program. So these programs, the Provincial Nominee Programs for Entrepreneurs, they are offered by the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Saskatchewan, even Northern Territories. Northern Territories is the most remote territory here, and the people who wish to move to Northern Territories, even they have access to a program as an entrepreneur. Now, all these programs, there are around, if we start calculating the number, there could be a couple of dozens of these programs, or at least tens of more than 20 programs and different with different descriptions. But generally, most of the programs are targeting people who have moderate net worth. They somehow own, in Canadian dollars, at least $500,000 or more. There's no upside for the investment, but there is a minimum investment requirement. You have to meet that minimum investment requirement, and later on during the process, you have to even justify and prove that how legitimately and through the documentation have you been able to acquire that wealth. Now, principal applicant can not only claim the wealth which principal applicant acquired on his own through his own effort in business or otherwise, and that principal applicant can also include the net worth of a wife or a spouse or a husband. So if the minimum requirement, for example, for a province is $600,000, 300,000 could come from the husband and 300,000 could come from the wife. I have seen cases in which applicants, and we have processed them successfully, applicants had far lower wealth because in a few countries, due to taxation arrangements and the tax planning aspects, sometimes the assets are are registered in the names of the second spouse other than the spouse who is actual entrepreneur or person. So if you have legitimately acquired explainable wealth, net worth, with any of the partners of any of the spouses that is counted towards the minimum net worth requirement. So if you meet the minimum net worth requirements, later on, you have to establish that there is a minimum investment amount which you can put into a business. For example, in Ontario, that minimum investment amount in an area which is outside of the Greater Toronto area is $200,000. Now, you have to commit $200,000 of investment minimum to even start that process. And they look at most of the programs, they look at your business ownership or management experience. They require, in the cases where you are purchasing an existing business or you're coming as a successor of a business, you have to conduct an exploratory visit within a certain period of time. For example, in Ontario, you must have conducted an exploratory visit within the last 12 months if you intend to buy a business in Ontario and come through an entrepreneur program. And then this program, or most of the programs, they require business concept. So if you are proposing a new business, then you have to provide a very, very well chalked out business concept. That what kind of a business are you investing into? What kind of an industry would it be? What would be your products? How much money are you putting in? How would you finance your business? What is your audit? What is your marketing plan? What is your human resource management plan? How are you going to grow your business? What is your business projection? So all those details are covered in the business plan. You have to be actively managing this business. This is a program in which entrepreneur programs generally are the programs in which they want the business persons or entrepreneurs to come to Canada and actually run the show. They don't want passive investors in it. They want people to not only invest money, but to transfer the skills which they have gathered in their home countries by actually running the business and transferring it to the other employees. There is an element of job creation because these programs, yes, definitely the first and foremost motivation behind these programs is they want to support businesses in Canada. They want to support to create jobs in Canada. So job creation has an integral status in this. And how many jobs do you create? What is the quality of job creation? That'll be part of the selection process. The next element is, which most of the programs require, that if you are coming to a province, Ontario or British Columbia or Northwestern Territories or Manitoba, you should have intention to make that province your home for the initial period of time. So if you are coming and the process is taking almost a year or more, then you come and you establish your business for another year or 2 years. For those, at least that period of time, you must have the intent to remain in that province. You do not have to choose a province on the basis of ease of getting into the program. And once you are in that province, once you are on work permit, you cannot just leave that business alone and go and settle in another province. Most of the time, say 75% of the times, you're expected to remain in that province, and you should possess that intention. If during the process, at any stage, the authorities feel that you have a different intention, they can always refuse your application. Next element is language proficiency. So since you are conducting business, or you would be conducting business in Canada or in one of the Canadian provinces, so Canada has two official languages, English or French. So they require some reasonable level of language proficiency in that province. You cannot just not know any language and still qualify for this. The language proficiency level is not as high as it is required for the skilled immigrants, but it is a decent level of proficiency where you could conduct your business within that province with relative comfort. And then there are certain other requirements which we can discuss, or which we closely discuss with the clients when they choose a single program and once they engage our law firm. Now, provincial entrepreneur programs, this is kind of recapping what this process is. Now, we've already talked that different provinces have their different immigration nominee programs, and this is for the entrepreneurs who are outside of Canada. It provides the opportunity to those entrepreneurs to come to Canada, and then provinces nominate them for the permanent residence. So once you are here in Canada, you come here on a work permit, you you implement the program or the business concept or business land you have given according to the agreement with the government. And then once you have established that business, you apply for nomination as a permanent resident. The provincial government or the territory would nominate you for permanent residence. Then you go to the federal government, secure your permanent resident. Once you become a permanent resident, you have all the constitutional rights except the right of vote and the right to have a passport. But if you spend 1095 days in Canada after you become after you have become a PR, then you can apply for the Canadian citizenship and Canadian passport, after which you get all the rights, including the right to have a Canadian passport, and you become a citizen of Canada. So these entrepreneur programs are stepwise programs which lead to citizenship. So when you are in the application process, you give a plan, you pick up a program, you meet all the elements, establish your credentials. You are allowed to come in Canada on a work permit. You establish your business on the work permit, later on get nominated for permanent residence. And when you have spent 1095 days of physical presence in Canada, you can apply for Canadian passport. And by you, as I've already said, it means you, your dependent spouse, and your dependent children. And dependent children are those unmarried children who are 22 years or below. Sisters, brothers, parents are not covered directly. But once you become a citizen or a permanent resident, you can always sponsor your dependent sisters and brothers, siblings, and you can always sponsor your parents subject to various requirements for the parental and parent and grandparent sponsorship. One thing which we often hear from even the American attorney counterparts is that Canada offers an opportunity to even sponsor your grandparents. So there are programs in which you can sponsor your parents and grandparents. Now, how does this work in actually? If we sum it up in a couple of processes, then the process is that you select a province. If you meet all the elements of that program, or if you plan your application in a way that you are likely to meet the criteria of selection, then you submit an expression of interest to that particular province or a government. Your attorney can do it on your behalf. Once the EOI is submitted, it's a point-based assessment based on your credentials, how much net worth you have, how much investment have you made in the business, are you proposing in the business, what are the strengths of your business plan, how many jobs are you creating, which industry are you targeting. Depending on all those elements, your profile is rated and or ranked among other applicants who are interested. And when if you have high enough score, then the government invites you to apply through a formal application process in which whatever you claim during the expression of interest about your net worth, about your investment amount, about the business concept, job creation, everything, you lead evidence, you provide evidence of that, of all the elements which you claimed in the EOI. So once you have finalized your plan and with your attorney, you have strategized and you have created your profile based on various elements and the evidence which you are likely to provide and which you can successfully provide, you can submit an EOI. If your profile is strong enough, you are invited to apply, after which you run complete process. At the end of that application process, you are interviewed by that particular province or authority or territory. And if everything goes well up to that level, then you sign a performance agreement with that province or territory. And once you sign that performance agreement, you can apply for work permit, come to Canada, establish business in Canada, and later get nominated for PR. And after PR, it leads to the pathway to permanent to citizenship. Now, here I have tried to, now since I told you that there are programs in Ontario and British Columbia, Manitoba, and it'll all depend which program do you select would depend on which elements of a particular program would you be able to meet. There are certain, in a few programs, the net worth requirements are different or higher than the other programs. In a few provinces, you may have a support system, or you may like weather more in a particular province or not. Depending on all those aspects, when we hold the initial consultations after you have reviewed it, we shortlist a particular program and then we submit expression of interest for that particular program. Here, just to give you an idea of how these programs operate, I have picked up Ontario's Immigrant Nominee Program. This program has been revised in the last few months or last year. And previously, since Ontario is the largest province in Canada, the demand from outside foreign nationals for coming to Canada, especially Ontario, is very high for this particular program. Therefore, the requirements of this program were pretty high than what you would see here. And you could not even come to Ontario without investing $1 million in Ontario. Or even outside of the outskirts of Ontario, you still needed about $500,000. So last year we did a case in which the client had to propose $1 million worth $1 million to $1.5 million, and only then we could secure an interview for that applicant, for that business person. Now, last year the government revised it downwards. Now, even if you have a net worth of $400,000, and you are able to invest $200,000 in Ontario, in the outer cities of Ontario, you may still be able to meet the requirements, provided you have a strong profile and you have good education, proficiency, business experience, and your business concept is strategized in such a way that it could get you maximum point. Now here, a few requirements are, like we talked, that you should have to be an experienced business person. In Ontario's program, they look at least 3 years or 36 months of full-time business experience in the last 60 months. So that's one requirement. The net worth requirement in Ontario is $800,000 if you are investing in the core Ontario province or in the city of Toronto. But if you are going outside the city of Toronto, outside the greater Toronto area, then the net worth requirement, it drops down to $400,000. Similarly, the amount of investment, if you're coming into the core Ontario in the middle of in the downtown Toronto, you are proposing to invest, then you need to invest $600,000. But if you go to the outskirts, by outskirts, I mean from the core GTA, if you drive outside and go 90 minutes out of this or 2 hours out of this, you would be out of greater Toronto area, where you can even put $200,000 and still compete. Similarly, if you are in information technology, communication sector, then again, you can invest $200,000 and still succeed. The other requirements in Ontario's Immigrant Nominee Program are you have to be actively involved on an ongoing basis in the management of that business. So it's not possible that you come here, you run the process successfully, you are in Canada on a work permit, and then you say that now 70% of the times I'll not be around, I'll be out of Canada looking after my business in Indonesia, Singapore, China, India, anywhere. So if you are picking up this program, you have to be actively involved in business, say around 75% of the time. You need to be around the business and be running the show. Your minimum equity control should be at least 1/3 of the business. So you still need to have minimum $200,000, or if your point system is strategized that you have to put in more, then you have to own it 100%. If the business is worth only $200,000, but if the business is worth $1 million and there are other participants in that business as well, then you should have at least 1/3 of the stake in that particular business. Then the investment in that particular business for Ontario purposes and for most of other programs is that you should be deriving active business income. You cannot just buy securities or stocks and bonds or put money in a bank account and draw income from it. Though you cannot just buy real estate and draw rental income. You should be actively involved in the business and you should be deriving business income. You should be creating jobs. There is a minimum requirement of 2 jobs, but more jobs you create, more score you get for it. If the quality of jobs is higher, for example, if you are creating low-end jobs, you may get lower number of points. But if you secure, say, 1 or 2 manager jobs or a couple of managers or 1 manager, then you may likely secure more points. Business-related visits, we have already talked in the past. But if you have a business which you are buying afresh, you cannot do away with the business visit, though you may get some points for an exploratory visit in Canada. But if you are if you are giving an idea or proposing a totally new business which you would establish from scratch, you may not need a business related visit. Otherwise, you may need a visit, or you do need a visit for buying an existing business. Is if the applicant is applying with a business partner, so it is possible that you are two partners and both of them say put in by a business which is worth $500,000 and you are contributing $250,000 each. So each of the applicant can apply under this program if you have enough investment amount which is required by that particular program. Now I'll recap what factors they look at. These are the major factors. There may be a few minor factors as well, but for nominating somebody as an entrepreneur, besides certain factors that there shouldn't be inadmissibility, there shouldn't be criminal background, there shouldn't be medical inadmissibility or other factors, your experience, then your specific experience in certain industries, in certain growth areas, in export, they are given due weightage. And then investment factors include network, job creation, business related visit, targeted key sector. For example, in Ontario, if you are investing in a tourism sector, or if you are investing in automobile or computer related IT and computers, then you get some credit for that. Then it depends the business location of that particular particular business you're proposing. That also helps, and scores are attributed to that location as well. For example, if you are suggesting a business in a city of 2.6 million like Toronto, the basic Toronto, you may not get as much score as if you are proposing a business in a population or in a town which is say 70,000 people population, because the need for a business would be more there. The need for job creation would be more in smaller areas or smaller communities. So that is how the system is framed, that they reward you more points for going to certain communities. Similarly, we have already talked about jobs, but the jobs are classified in Canadian occupational classifications as job O's and A's and B's. B is the lowest, O is the management level job. So if you are creating a manager vacancy, you get more score, otherwise you get. Similarly, your education would help. There are minimum requirements. You shouldn't be less than grade 12, but if you have higher education, bachelor's and master's, you may accordingly get higher score. Language proficiency, you are required to possess certain minimum language proficiency, but you may be able to secure higher. All right, I think someone has unmuted the device. I would appreciate if you could mute the device. All right, now the minimum proficiency requirement is CLB 5, for example. If you are writing English, then CLB 4 is the minimum requirement. But we've already talked about the physical residence in Ontario, active involvement, satisfaction of performance agreement. The performance agreement, as we discussed earlier, is an agreement which at the end of application, if you succeed in the interview, you sign an agreement with the government in which you are government and that individual are agreeing on certain milestones and certain timelines that person would during which the person would establish that business. So that performance agreement, you must have met those terms before being nominated as a permanent resident. Now, this is the entrepreneur program.